The Federal Reserve is the United States central bank in our monetary system here in the US. Although the word federal appears in the name, it's actually a private institution which ironically also has no reserves. Like other banks in the past, such as the Bank of England and the first and second banks of the United States, the name was purposely used to be misleading so that the public would believe that this institution was run by the government and not wealthy bankers with their own interests. Now, that's not to say there is no relationship between the government and the Federal Reserve System, but most of the structure that connects the Federal Reserve to our government is simply just smoke and mirrors to distort reality and hide the fact that the institution is not run by the government and instead acts more so as a partner. The Federal Reserve started in 1913 under President Woodrow Wilson after the crisis of 1907 caused Congress to examine the need for a central banking system, a bank that could act as the lender of last resort and bail out the financial markets in case of economic crisis. In 1910, a group of wealthy bankers and investors held a secret meeting at Jekyll Island. This meeting was to discuss reforming the banking system, and this group of men were able to lay the foundation of the system we know today as the Federal Reserve, a system that was made to benefit the personal interests of these wealthy bankers. The Federal Reserve uses open market operations, which is basically the buying and reselling of government bonds or securities. Government bonds or securities are basically government IOUs backed by taxpayer dollars. The action of the Fed to buy and sell bonds controls the money supply in circulation. When the Fed buys bonds, they are depositing credits into their district banks. Those banks can then loan money out to the public and charge interest on it. This puts more money in circulation and is indicated by the lowering of Fed interest rates. The opposite happens when the Fed sells bonds. The Fed also uses a system called fractional reserve banking. This means that banks can retain a fraction of depositors' funds while loaning out the rest. Banks are able to loan out money exceeding the amount of deposits that they have and then charge interest on these loans. So in other words, you're being charged interest on money that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in the bank's deposits, and the credits were never initially created by the Fed to begin with. By acting as a lender of last resort, the Fed can loan money to both banks and the government, capitalizing on the debt created, especially during economic crises. The money is created out of thin air and loaned out at interest. As stated before, the catch is the money does not exist to pay back the interest on the loan. Because the money hasn't been created by the Fed, and the creation of new money creates more debt. Therefore, the Federal Reserve is a debt-based system that enslaves the population to an unpayable debt. So who benefits from this system? Well, that's easy. The people who control the money supply benefit the most, of course. Aristotle condemned usury because he believed money served a natural purpose of being a means of exchange. When money was used to create more money, it unnaturally became the end itself. When usury is permitted by a central bank or a group of people, it's easier for the people behind this institution to use the money that they have basically an infinite supply of to buy political power. They do this by funding campaigns and buying off politicians to stand in as puppets while this shadow government ultimately controls everything. It's not a conspiracy, and many prominent figures throughout history have warned us about usury. The most famous example has to be from Jesus Christ himself when he threw out the money changers or the usurers from his temple. This was the only time throughout Jesus' ministry where he is noted using physical force. It's very important that we acknowledge who this force was used against, the money changers, and how substantial it is that the perfect man who is incapable of sin demonstrates justified violence towards a particular group of people over the issue of usury. There is biblical truth to the saying that money is the root of all evil. Central banking has been debated since before this country was founded, and yet our founding fathers decided not to include a central bank in our Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution grants Congress the right to coin money. While many people would not trust the money supply being in the hands of greedy politicians, I just have one question to ask. Would you prefer it at the hands of greedy bankers operating behind a curtain and acting as a shadow government that funds the endeavors of the greedy politicians? Or would you rather pull the curtain down and have those in charge be directly accountable to we, the people? And this does not mean that I think we should keep the same system and just hand it down to Congress. It would still benefit the same people. We need a total reform of our monetary system. Although the Fed has failed at its initial promise to combat financial instability and has even been credited for causing crises such as the Great Depression and the financial crash of 2008, our government still insists on using the failed system. It just makes it blatantly obvious that the Fed serves other interests, and it's our responsibility to get to the bottom of those interests. Once we do that, we will see that the Federal Reserve is the heart of the New World Order. It's literally their lifeline that funds their endeavors and their agenda, and it's because we the people are under its illusion and ultimately give a useless piece of paper its power, simply by participating in the system, or what I like to call it, the Matrix. Like the famous philosopher Plato once stated, the world perceived isn't the ultimate reality. Emphasis on the word perceived, as there is an important distinction between perception and reality, and I think Plato perfectly demonstrates this in Plato's allegory of the cave. There are people below the cave that only know the shadows on the wall as their reality since they were born. But outside their perception exists a reality that they don't even know exists, and they will never know unless they question their perceived reality and seek truth outside of their worldview, the very thing that they've always known to be true. I'm asking you to abandon the cave or your worldview for just a moment and seek the truth and understand that our monetary system is just a shadow on the wall. Once you do this, you will realize the scam that was pulled on our nation and humanity, and you will seek righteous justice as Jesus demonstrated for us in his temple. And if we wish to defeat the New World Order agenda, then we must abolish the very system that empowers and finances it. We must end the Fed.